Well, let's get this started. Good afternoon, everybody. Joseph Miranda, Executive Realty. Appreciate everybody being here for today's training, the latest in our series of Ask the Broker, where we try to deep dive into some high-level training. So, shameless plug. If you're watching this, if you're watching the recording and you're not an agent of MX Realty, or if you're in the room, not an agent of MX Realty, and you want to get to know us a little bit better, to schedule a confidential call, we are going to be talking about the process of transaction coordinating. So, as you know, in our office in MX Realty, we have an in-house transaction coordinator. Everything that we do, we have a system, we have a process. There's a lot of redundancies. There's a lot of oversight. There's different people in this process that are involved in this to make sure that we're compliant on a real estate transaction from beginning all the way to the end. So whether you use our in-house transaction coordinator, whether you have your own transaction coordinator, or you do your own transaction coordinating, this is going to be a very valuable training. Even if you just take one piece out of this, something that you're not doing currently, and you're just a little bit better because of this training, then it's going to help you avoid pitfalls and help you avoid issues down the road. I think it's really, really important that we understand the flow and the process of a transaction. Number one, we need to know what's in a contract, but number two, we need to understand how those dates correlate, and we need to know that we need to be the resource and the solution for our customers, right? So that being said, let's go to the next slide. And, we're happy to answer any questions. Please take notes on your questions. We'll do a Q&A session at the end. If there's something that we missed, or if there's something that you do in a transaction that you can share with us to help make us a little bit better, we're always open to improvement as well. But please save that to the end when this is all done. That being said, I'm going to, where are we at here now? Remember your 20%. So yeah, so transaction coordinating is all about your 20%. Transaction coordinating really, when we talk about your 20%, these are the things that you do that lead to income generation, right? These are your income generating activities: lead generation, lead follow-up, appointments, running contracts, and getting those contracts closed. Right. So once you get to the transaction coordinating stage, you already have, you've written the contract, you've negotiated the contract. Now you are to that closing those sales stage. And I know that that's on the 20%, but the transaction coordinating is the paperwork side of it, right? So you've negotiated your contract, but there's still work that needs to be done, right? The transaction coordinating side is following the guide, the contracts, the deadlines, the dates, the contingencies, right? They're still not negotiated, right? Like an inspection is a contingency, and an issue may come up in an inspection, and that's where the agent needs to step in, right? Negotiating that side is the 20% side of closing those sales. The paperwork, the follow-up, the reminders, the things like that, those are not part of your 20%, right? That's your 80%. It's something that needs to be done. It's part of the process, it's part of the transaction, but it's not to more business or more sales necessarily. It's not, it moves the transaction forward, but it's not something that an agent needs to focus on or needs to do. An agent needs to focus on having a great experience for their customer, so that then they can get referral and repeat business from that customer. Next slide. That being said, going to be from me is going to be moot. We're going to go on, and I'm going to introduce our featured presenter today. So we have a special treat for you guys today, where you don't have to listen to me and everything that I say today. Today you're going to get to hear from our transaction coordinator herself, right? You're going to meet the wizard behind the curtain, right? You're going to get to meet the person that actually makes this happen. Irene's going to go through. We've been working on this process. This is something that, we started out, I think Irene's been with me years now. She came in and she's really changed the direction of this business. She's been able to take the things that, that are in my head or in the heads of our agents and make them become a reality. We're very privileged. We're very honored to have somebody like Irene in our organization. If you're in our organization, you likely interacted with Irene, and you know that she works at a very, very high level. You guys, will know that she's very organized and very thorough with the things that she does. So she really is the best person to talk about this, not only because this is what she does, but because she understands these things at probably a better level than me at this point. So I'm not going to continue to go on. I'm going to hand it over to Irene and let her tell you more about how she handles transactions and why you need a transaction coordinator.
Right. Thank you so much, Joe. So, yep. So, just a disclaimer again. So, my name is Irene, and I'm the transaction coordinator of Miranda Executive Realty. And this training is actually meant for Miranda Executive Realty agents. So, anything that I share about this, it's more of like the best practices and personal experience handling transactions. So, this is not intended as an official standard or any legal advice. As I always mention with the agents that I work with, I'm not licensed, but I can only state facts. So if ever you have any questions or any concerns, you could go ahead and do so and let me know at the end. So moving on. So why transaction coordination matters. So some of the agents that I actually spoke with for a couple of years, I would say, that they do handle their transactions mostly because as for them, they would say that, it's just something that, I can handle this because I've been licensed for quite a long time. I've handled a lot of transactions in the past. I know how the contract works. I know what the timelines are. I know the documents that I need. So why would I need a transaction coordinator in a sense? But basically, if you remember what Joe mentioned, right? So the 20%, if you going back to that slide, right? 20% other things that you need to do. It doesn't say anything about transaction coordinating in there. Although, yeah, it's number 4, I would say, to write and negotiate contract. But paperwork, it's just too much. Like timelines, timeline-wise documents, having those documents uploaded in any DocuSign that you have in there, for Simplicity Transaction Desk, just to have it signed. It takes too much. So that is why it matters. So as what we can see here, it streamlines the process. So it keeps the transaction organized. So when you actually get a contract, right, and then you copy your transaction coordinator at the start of the transaction or the welcome email that you send to the listing agent, to the attorney, to the escrow, title company, and what have you, or the lender, it actually gives them a notion that, oh, hey, they are something that he or she is not the only one handling the transaction, not only the selling agent or the listing agent. They have a transaction coordinator. And most of the time, the questions that I have regarding documents and whatnot, they would actually relay it to the transaction coordinator. Why? Because it gives them the notion that, yeah, it's sort of like they have a system in place and they do have different department that handles everything else. So when they would only reach out to the agent, mostly it's more of like negotiation, like seller credit, buyer credit, and whatnot. Also, it says here minimizes errors and risks. So if you can remember, so when you actually submit contracts to a transaction coordinator, like even just the listing agreement or buyer agency agreement and your compensation agreement, we actually, I mean, I do check it. We have a compliance manager in place as well. So we do check all of those documents for you. We check out the initial missing, any document missing, or any name missing. Sometimes you have the seller, you don't have the buyer. Sometimes the buyer's name it was misspelled, or there's an initial in there, usually on buyer agency agreements or listing agreements, wherein there's a broker initial in there and there's a consumer initial. There are missing checks, missing dates. So we check those. And again, some of these mistakes would be costly for you. It may actually revoke your license if, it's something that's really like a big illegal thing, or I don't know whatnot. So that's why we actually wanted to minimize those errors and risks. That's why a fresh set of eyes would really help. Let's say, because if you've noticed, sometimes agents would actually submit contracts like in the middle of the night. Sometimes they actually receive an offer, let's say around midnight, and of course they're drafting it out. There is like time sensitivity, so they try to draft it, or they try to sign it as fast as possible, so that we could go ahead and go under contract and whatnot. And sometimes we miss some details, little details that that for a fact that these things. But if there is like a fresh set of eyes, then it could actually be like, oh, hey, you forgot this and that. So that actually reminds you to, like, oh, yep, I missed those initials and whatnot. And of course, ensure compliance. If you're using a transaction coordinator, the TC would actually follow up everything. Like, oh, hey, you're missing this disclosure, you're missing this, so everything else. And improves client experience, because at some point as an agent, you also handle different transactions. Probably you've been handling like 5 listings in a go. So, and there's like a simple question from the client. So, the transaction coordinator, again, as we've mentioned, he or she could provide facts, right, to your clients and whatnot. So it improves client experience in a way wherein they have another person to talk to. They have questions, concerns, or maybe they just lost a copy of the escrow letter. They could actually ask that from the transaction coordinator herself. So those things, and enhances professionalism, because again, it gives us a notion that we have a system in place when a transaction comes in. Okay, so moving on. So transaction coordinator checklist. So as a transaction coordinator, it's more of like checklist, timelines. So if you've seen my welcome emails, it's a long email when I send out one, and it takes time to build it out. So what are the things that are happening before that welcome email is being sent out? So we'll tackle about that on the next slides. So it was actually me, according to Joe, before I started with Miranda Executive Realty. And look what happened to me. Just kidding aside. All right. So before anything else, so always copy your transaction coordinator on all of your communications. Um, if you've actually worked with me in the past, I always try to reiterate or advise the agents to always copy me on all of your communications, even though you don't even use a transaction coordinator on your transaction, even just for rentals and renters. So because it's hard to keep up with transactions that the TC is not copied or not aware of what's going on. So let's say, for example, you came to us on the lobby room, because that's how we work, right? Office hours. You have a question regarding your transaction. Even though I'm not the TC, if I can actually see, or I've been copied on all the emails, all the comms, all the documents that have been processed on this transaction, I would have an idea on what's going on, and I could go ahead and help you out. But if I am not copied, usually what happens if I get copied, let's say after the second escrow letter was already submitted, even the parties involved would be surprised, like, who's this? Why is she being copied all the time? And then what's going to happen is, like, it duplicates everything. It's like a ripple effect where it duplicates all the work, because let's say the title company already sent out their timeline and their welcome email, and then they found out that the listing or the selling agent has a transaction coordinator. And then of course the TC would request all the documents again, all the communications, all the changes, until that time that the TC has been copied. So it takes like everybody's time, like it duplicates all of the tasks that could have been avoided when you actually copy your transaction coordinator at the start of the transaction, regardless, again, if you are not using the TC or not. Of course, it's up to you. Or maybe you just really wanted to submit an offer and you want something, if you want someone to actually look at it. Of course, you could always ask the broker, but you could always have me. And I'm always on the virtual lobby room 9 to 5. So why not just go ahead and just show up in there, show your offer, and see if there are missing, I don't know, contingencies and inspection deadlines, maybe a miss of a number in there. Instead of inspection of 10 days, you just put 0. So at least we could get that caught up in time for those things. So transaction coordinating begins when you have an effective contract. So there's a difference between effective and executed. Okay, so effective contract would be it's the contract that has been signed by all parties, so it is now effective. Executed is meaning to say all of the terms and conditions in that contract have been completed. So what you actually get an effective contract, let's say the access contract has been signed by all parties, and then let's say there are some cross out or changes along the way, and they have been all initialed by both parties as well, and that we can call that an effective contract. That's why when you actually see me submit a timeline for all of the parties, your clients and the lenders, listing agent, selling agent, or what have you, we have the effective contract date in there because that is where that's like the starting point of all the timelines that will follow through. So not checklist number one. So we have the documents. Again, the disclaimer, this is not a comprehensive list, but rather a guide. So the documents that we require upfront when you submit, like when you submit a document or submit a transaction for PC processing. So we always need to have a buyer agency or listing agreement. You could always submit this even though you don't have an effective contract yet, but we would rather have the buyer agency agreement or listing agreement upon submitting the assets contract as well. That way we could go ahead and take a look and check and make sure that your assets contract ties up with your listing agreement or buyer agency agreement. Of if you remember the past trainings that we had for the NAR settlement, right? So we want to make sure that any commissions, especially on those part, and the name on the contract and the name on the listing agreement or the buyer agency agreement, it all matches. So that's why we need to have those. Excuse me. And as for the compensation agreement as well, yeah, we need that. Regardless if you are the listing agreement, I mean the listing side or the selling side. If you're the listing side, yes, definitely we would need a compensation agreement. This is how you could protect your payment or commission as a selling agent. For the listing side, not really much, because again, we always believe that everything that we do is ethical, moral, and legal. So regardless if, let's say, for example, the selling agent was not able to provide a compensation agreement for some reason, they forgot, or I don't know, we will still always be going to do our best to actually give out the compensation that's listed on the listing agreement. Although, yeah, compensation agreement protects everyone because that's where it includes the compensation for both sides, or for technically for the selling agent. As for HOA and condo riders, these are important, and this also has to be checked on the access contract. Remember on the like page 12 of the contract, there are addenda in there. Again, not addendums, it's addenda. Please don't use that. Don't even put that in email because it will be like an email thread that you use addendums instead of addenda. Okay, that's what Joe always mentioned. It's addenda. So for HOA and condo riders, so again, as I've mentioned, you have to submit that along with the access contract. And on the access contract, those riders should be checked as well, because that actually ties it up that that is part of your effective contract. Okay, let me just, okay, and lead-based paint disclosure. So this is for pre-1978. But if the building, or I don't know, the condo is 1978, here in the office, we still ask them to have the lead-based paint disclosure just to make sure, just to protect the client. But if ever that they don't require it, like the listing agent doesn't really want it to, and that should be fine. But here, as a practice, even though it's 1978 instead of pre-1978, we still wanted to have this ready. So, yep. Any addenda, so like post-closing occupancy, I don't know, appraisal contingency, or any addenda like post-closing, instead of using the post-closing document itself, you use an addenda because you wanted to add additional information, words, or additional furniture, I don't know, on that addenda. Please submit that to me as well, because I will not be able to track those timelines or contingencies for you if you do not submit all of the documents related to the file. Contingency disclosure, same thing as I've mentioned. Post closing, oh, I mean appraisal contingency, sale of buyer's property, like like if the agent is also the listing agent is also the seller, you would actually need those as well. So everything else. So technically, it all boils down to all of the documents that you have on that contract. I have to have that documents as well. Even the pre-approval from the lender, because that's where I get the lender's information as well, and that would actually confirm that, oh, okay, so they already have a lender in place, especially for buyers. Checklist number two. So once I get all the documents, so sometimes you submit a document like it's just one PDF. So what I actually do as well is to cut them all up. So page 1 to 13 is the access contract. Page 1 to 3 is the rider. Page 1. So I try to chop them off because sometimes there is a post closing occupancy or there's an addendum you do want the lender to get her hands off or his hands off, right? You don't want to send it to the lender. You don't want to send it to the listing agent or to the other side. You don't want the title company to have it. So that's why for documents, I try to cut them all up per document. So when I send out the welcome email, it's separate document instead of the one that you do, wherein it's just one PDF when you submit an offer. That way it categorizes them, and then if there are certain information or certain documents that you don't want a certain party to receive, you could avoid that. So for the checklist number two, so get all the parties involved. So as you can see with the emails that I do send out, so there the listing agent, the selling agent, the escrow agent. Sometimes escrow and title is the same, sometimes not. Sometimes they do have their own attorney, the HOA association information, condo association, the transaction coordinator for the other party, or any other parties that they want to copy. Because sometimes lenders also have their own admin assistants, or sometimes the listing agent want her or his team leader copied, or his or her broker copied. So everyone that wanted to be involved, try to have them all collated at once. Submit that as an email to your TC, because the TC will be the one to just organize them, like the one showing in here, role in the transaction, name, company title, sell, office, email. Because this way, we would only have like one thread. The reason behind on that is we will only have like one thread wherein we could just go ahead and respond to that. So let's say you have 10 transactions in place. I hope you all have 10 transactions in place all at once. It will be so confusing if you get a bunch of email every time there is an update. So that's why the label of the email is like, let's say Irene, sale to Joe, property address, and transaction updates. So that way it's easier when you actually research that from your email or from your Gmail account, and then look for that, and then just respond, remove the unwanted parties, I would say, and just submit the document or submit the transaction or ask your question. It's easier for everybody because now you would have like, oh, the thread of transaction or thread wherein everything is in there, and it actually helps you out on paper trail. Let's say a title company disputes that, oh, you never submitted this document, whatnot. Oh, it's here. It's here on this email thread. So it gives you, it protects you as well. So the third one, trust but verify. So if you've noticed, even though you submit an email to me or like you submit all your documents, it's technically it's easy to spot on what effective date it will be, because that will be the last signature on the contract or on the access contract. But hey, there are instances wherein those signatures at the last page, wherein there is a date for the buyer or the seller. Sometimes there is a counter offer or there was a change, there had been a correction, there had been a cross out, and the initials have been added a day after that date on the seller side or the buyer side has taken place. So that changes the effective date. Let's say everybody signed today, August 10th, I mean September 10th. But then suddenly, oops, shoot, we have to change a date. Let's say a contingency on your inspection. Instead of 10 days, we wanted 11 days. So they crossed it out, initials were added. So technically, that changes the effective date. that would change to today or tomorrow, let's say September 11th. So that's why I always trust and verify. So, hey, I can see that this is the effective date. Is this correct? Or sometimes it would be much more easier if you could just go ahead and just say, hey, these are the contract documents. This is the effective date. That will be easier for me. Oh, okay, this is the effective date. And then I could go ahead and run through the timeline through that effective date. Then for contingencies and dates. So sometimes it rarely happens, but sometimes there are dates in there that's weird. I don't understand, or it's like, this check mark is kind of like not going anywhere. So I have to verify that with you guys. That's why I always that's what it says: trust but verify. Mortgage application started. So I also trust that when you actually submit a pre-approval, that when an access contract has been submitted to everybody, the application has been started by the lender. But again, we have to verify. So I will still go ahead and send out an email, or you should send out an email as an agent to your lender, to your buyer's lender, to confirm that, hey, has the mortgage application been started? That way we could confirm, oh, okay, this is what you mentioned. This application has been started in this. So we could go back. Let's say they disputed that, oh, it's taking a while because we submitted the application this, or we started this. Then we could go back. Let's say this is what you mentioned. So why are we getting a different information? Okay, for HOA and condo documents, so it 50% of the time if this happens. So let's say they put it on the MLS as $59 per month or $60 per month. When you submit the application along with the documents, they say, oh, shoot, it's not, it's 65. So you have to always trust and verify. That's why you have to get the condo information or HOA contact information on checklist number 2, like since the start. And then commission, of course, because sometimes if you submit a listing agreement or a buyer agency agreement, but then there's a referral fee. Let's say this is a Zillow lead. You have to pay for a closing fee, or like referral, a paid at closing referral fee, like 25%, 30%. We want to know for transaction fees. So we don't know if sometimes you, most of the time you actually put that in the listing agreement or buyer agency agreement, but most of the time the agent pays for it. So we just wanted to confirm what was your agreement with your client, and then so that we would know when once we create your disbursement authorization where we will get the transaction fee. Checklist number 4, contingencies. So I think this one is pretty much self-explanatory. So this is what I send to I mean along with the welcome email that I send out. So it includes the total contract price, and again the effective date that I have confirmed with the agent. And there's a system in there where, and let's say the first deposit is 5,000, 5 days, or usually 3 days from the effective date. So it automatically adjusts the dates for me. So I will show you the tracker or the template that I use to have this, and I will share that to the agents as well, so that you could go ahead and track your own transactions moving forward, if you actually wanted to do so as well. And maybe, you know, you could also spot on if your TC made a mistake. Okay. So other contingencies. So again, as I always mention, this is not a comprehensive list, but rather a guide. There may be more contingencies aside from this list. It always depends on the documents that you have included on that specific transaction. Not all transactions would have a sale of buyer's property agreement, appraisal contingency, post-closing, pre-closing, and so much more. So you just have to be aware of all of those documents that you have so you could include them on your timeline or contingencies. And as for the blue ones, the blue box, the listing agreement, compensation, and resale showing agreement. So this is something that you don't really include on the email that you send out to all of the parties, but you can always send that information to your client themselves, because for listing agreements, hey, we want to make sure that your listing agreement is not expiring soon, and then that contract is, like you think it will fall apart and your listing agreement already expired. So might as well go ahead and have an extension already, a modification of the listing agreement. So that way, just it's more of like just keep in mind of the deadlines of these agreements on the blue box. That way you can avoid issues or concerns or pushback from your clients in the future. And then number 5, email. So transaction coordinating is big on emails. Everything is on email threads. So the first two emails that you would have are welcome emails to all the parties and to your clients. So as you can see, almost the same thing. I always copy you guys, the agents. And then with all the parties, the clients are not included. But with the welcome agent for the clients, it's only the agent and the attorney if there is, or a representation for the client's email. So it's almost the same thing. There's just a change of words, welcome. So it's more of like for all parties, transactional. For clients, more of personal touch. And as for the rest of the emails, these emails should happen at least within the day or within first 24 hours once the contract has been submitted or once it has been submitted to the transaction coordinator. Why? Because these are sensitive, time sensitive. Like the timeline, you have to send it out as soon as possible. Because what if the escrow is 3 days after and the contract went effect? I mean, the contract is it effective, let's say Friday. So the deadline for the first escrow would be what? Monday. Because that's 3 days after, let's say, for example. So you have to send out the welcome email right away. That way, everybody, all the parties would be aware that Monday is the due date, and your clients, let's say if they are the buyer, would be able to plan ahead and make sure that that deposit will go through because we don't want your buyers to be on default. And as for the other emails, so we have to request the HOA condo application and whatnot from the listing agent if you're the selling side. And you want to provide that to the selling agent if you're the listing side. Because again, these are important, these are time sensitive, and this may break or make your contracts. Because what if they get denied? After long waits, 45 days under contract, and then suddenly it all just fails because the buyers were not approved. So we want to provide all of those, boom, first day, so that they could go ahead and process everything that they need to do for the application. Wiring instructions for escrow. Again, you have to get that information as early as possible. And then there is a warning on the next page after this. And then again, confirm the start of the mortgage process, just like what I mentioned earlier. So a warning for emails. So I don't know if you've noticed, but there is like a very bold red these warnings on my emails, all of my emails. Because for wiring instructions, fraud is on the rise. That's what it says here, right? So if ever you are dealing with buyers doing wiring instructions or wiring or for escrow and whatnot, you have to make sure that they are aware of the things that they have to do prior to sending any money, right? For wiring, again, they always have to call you first and confirm if ever they receive any wiring instruction. Most of the time with title companies, they do have their passcode embedded on their wiring instructions so that they have to call the company to get that first and then before processing the wiring. But please be careful on this one. Sorry, it never happened on this office yet, but we just wanted to avoid because this is big because we don't want your clients to lose their deposit. It's like what's the lowest deposit that we get? 3,000, 5,000, sometimes even $10,000. We don't want that for our clients anyways, right? It will be a huge loss for you as well as an agent. So number 6. So it's more of like collate, compile, and organize. So once we actually got those emails out, we have condo information, verified all the information that we got. Now we actually collate all the documents. So we, as a selling agent, you want to go ahead and get the condo documents, HOA documents, like the master insurance, rules and regulations, articles of incorporation. Everything else are actually on our agent resources. I'm gonna share that or show that to you later on. But the reason you wanted to get those because especially sometimes you need the minutes for open violations, open permits. So and then just making sure that there are no assessments. So that's where you would actually get that from those documents, from condo documents, like the most recent financial budget, because I think that is being needed by the lenders as well. So we that's why we have to gather those information and then you collate them. And as what it says here, you have to add them on your broker compliance platform. Here on our office, we use Back Agent. So some of you have used it for your rental transactions. But if you're using me as a TC, I upload those documents for you. There are timelines in there as well. The reason we use that is we have to make sure that everybody, all the agents and the brokerage itself, is compliant when it comes to transactions. This is also one way to protect you as an agent if worst comes to worst, that there are disputes and whatnot with regards to any transaction that you've handled. We can always back it up with all the documents that you have submitted. So sometimes I may be harsh on you guys, like asking you to, hey, I missed this initial, I missed this. Your compliance manager, like, hey, we need this, we need this, we need this. So we're not being hard on you guys. It's for your own sake, for your own good, to make sure that everything is compliant. That way, if ever we go back to that certain transaction and then there are disputes, we could protect you and we would know what happened just based on the email threads, based on the documents that you have submitted. Then afterwards, we continue with contingency tracking. So I will share with you the tracker that I use for that. And then we also verify that all the steps are completed and documents are correctly compiled and tracked. So that's also, as I've mentioned, that I do check the missing initials, information, and whatnot. So as you can see, everything is redundant here on the systems that I'm showing to you, is because that's what we do. Again, these are compliance, and any mistake would actually will be costly. It will be a costly mistake, or I don't know, something, maybe a small thing for now, but it may be costly in the future. Yep. So that is why we try to be redundant. Like we would upload your documents on a secure drive that we have. We also upload it in Back Agent, the broker compliance platform. So, and when I submit it, of course, I review it, right? As an agent, you review it. As your TC, I review it. As a compliance manager, she reviews it. As a broker, he reviews it. So it's like four heads, better than one, right? And then if ever nothing, we still missed at something, and that means that's really something that I don't know. I can only say so much, but I don't think we would miss anything at that point. It's already a 4 point security, I would say. All right. So what's the difference when you have your transaction coordinator, transaction coordinating with Miranda Executive Realty? So as a Jedi Master of Transactions, we'll let you do the legwork, we'll do the paperwork. So I don't know, it's something that Joe used for me before, that I have it tattooed on my arm as well. That I'm Yoda, baby Yoda, I don't know. And yep, we want to be the master of transactions. If we actually go back to the first slide, there's a footprint in there wherein there's a flower, or like, I don't know, like a leaf that pulled up. So that's what we wanted to do. We don't just want to be transactional in all of our transactions. We want long, if you remember the previous training, follow up like a boss, right? We want lifetime customers. We want lifetime good relationship with lenders, with title companies, and whatnot. This way, if you actually have a good relationship with everybody, if worst comes to worst, let's say you use them again as a title company, you had an issue, it's easier to actually get assistance, or it's easier to get a favor, I would say. Let's say there's this, and then you work with this listing agent for two transactions already. And then there's an issue with a specific contingency. I don't know, like an inspection maybe. Probably we need to extend like a day or two for the inspection period. It's easier to request. Again, they are there to protect their clients, the best interest of their own client as well. But it's easier to negotiate when you have good relationship with everybody, not just with transactions, right? With your life, with your friends, with your family, with your loved ones. So as long as you have maintained a very good working relationship with everybody, so it would actually benefit for you in the long run. And again, you don't want like one-time transactions. Let's say you were able to sell this house for 1 million. What if they sell it? If they like you, they would actually go back and let you list the property. But if they don't, they would even say that I hate this agent. They would even badmouth you. So technically, if you should have gotten the business of their, I don't know, their best friend, their mother, their father, it's gonna be a business loss for you. And so strategies to leverage. So let's say for sellers. So number one, we provide all condominium or HOA documents via email immediately. So what's the reason behind as a seller providing these documents? So we have these in our Miranda Executive Realty website. So the checklist for 3 stories and up. I don't know if everybody have seen this. Okay, there you go. Yep, here, 3 stories and up. Okay, so what's the issue with this one? Because based on the condo writer, right? If you go back to a condo writer, there is a contingency in there that that says that you can't. Um, hold on, let me just. Is it sharing?
I can see the MX document, but not the condo writer.
Yep. Okay, it's actually not showing up. Oh, okay, anyways, let's just continue. Okay, so if you actually have seen a condo writer, right? So on the condo writer itself, let me try to do this. If you could give me one quick moment. There we go. I hope it shows. Right. Okay, there you go. So this is the condo writer. So in here, there is a part of the condo writer where it says non-developer disclosure. So this actually contingency is like it's like it's never ending contingency until you actually until the selling agent or the buyer receives all the documents written in here. As you can see, this agreement is voidable by buyer by delivering written notice to buyers to cancel within 3 days. So it only means that if you actually read this condo writer, it only means that until the selling the buyer and the selling agent, well, selling agent is receiving it in behalf of the buyer, did not receive all of these documents on their behalf, then they would always have 3 days prior to receiving the last document written in here to actually cancel. So let's say the buyer fails on everything, all of the contingencies, but then you fail to provide, let's say, what, an article of incorporation from the HOA, I mean, from the condo association. That means even though they miss out their first escrow, they missed out their what inspection contingency, when they wanted to actually cancel, they will be able to actually get their deposit back. So again, what we're trying to do here is just to make sure that you are able to comply, because that's your job, right? As an agent, is you will be able to comply as the listing agent with all of the contingencies. And this is one of the contingency that you have to follow through as always, like providing all the documents for your buyer. Okay.
And that cannot be waived. In there, it
Yep.
says any purported waiver of these voidability rights shall be of no effect.
Yep, that is true. So regardless of whatever it is, it's more of like it's timeless within this contract agreement. Okay, so yep, going back. And also for sellers, avoid aggressive follow-ups and contingencies. Follow up the day after they pass. So again, as I've mentioned, it is not our job to ensure the other side's compliance. Your job is to ensure, as a listing agent, that you comply on the listing side's timeline. And that is one of the timelines. Again, with the condo documents, it's one of the timelines that you actually have to make sure of. That way you can leverage that on the whole transaction negotiation part. I hope if that makes sense. And as for the buyer, as a buyer, timelines are very important for you as a listing agent, because anything that you miss could put the buyer's deposit, escrow, in jeopardy. They may lose their deposit. So that's why for all of the contingencies, as much as possible, that's why sometimes, even though it's just an HOA application or condo application, condo association application, I try to like go ahead and send me an extension if needed that we will send to the buyers and send to the listing agent if needed. Because again, that would actually put your buyers on default if we were not able to follow through the deadline as a buyer or as representing the buyer or as a selling agent. So again, one of the things that you can do is send deadline reminders to the 3 days in advance to prevent default. So that's why I would always message you, send you an email if there is a contingency that's already expired. Let's say this Friday. So I'm gonna go ahead and advise you, let's say Wednesday or Thursday, that hey, inspection contingency will be closing out soon. Do you need an extension? Do we need to do something else? So that's what we do. And as for number one, avoid following up on condo HOA documents as possible. If you actually remember what I just mentioned earlier, so that would be your leverage as a selling agent. That is why you are not following that one, if that makes sense. Anything to add, Joe, on that one, or no?
No, no, you covered it great.
Okay. And as for the follow-up process, so just looking at this, right? So don't wait for your client or any party to actually like become a ghost or a skeleton, just waiting for an update. We always we have this motto like if the client asks for an update, then we fail, and we give an update even though there's no update. What do we mean by that? So if there's no update, then just send an email like, hey, there's no update as of the moment, we're still waiting to close, we're still waiting to clear the close, something to that effect. That way they know that we're still here, we're not invisible. And just make sure as well, remember number five, always copy intended parties and exclude unintended ones. Let's say you want to go ahead and send an email to the listing agent. You don't want your client's information included in there, right? So you always exclude the ones. So be careful on that one. Because what's going to happen is that once they get a hold of the client, your client's email address, they might reach out to that. I don't know. We always trust, but we have to be diligent as well. So what's the agent role in these transactions? So on this one, you must, again, include your TC early because we don't want surprises, and then negotiate for clients. So pretty much what I've mentioned, everything else. So, but the most important on this one is remember the TC is not your personal admin and cannot negotiate or give advice, only facts. So I cannot provide any advice, any negotiation. Let's say your seller called me directly and asking for this, because there's an issue like this. Can we go ahead and lower this price? Can we go ahead and extend this? I can't do that. What I'm going to say to your clients is to call your listing agent or selling agent directly. I'm sorry if I have to do that, even though sometimes I know what to do, because again, I'm not licensed, and we do have a list here of the things that I can do and I cannot do for you as your TC. Other resources, unlicensed assistance, but what I can't do. So you can go ahead and review this for the MX Realty agents when you get the chance, so that you would actually know what you can and you can ask me to do. But again, moving forward for documents and whatnot, I will always be here to help you out. Like if you want me to draft addenda, extension, and whatnot, I could go ahead and have that prepared for you so that you could go ahead and send that out to your clients. So what are the tools that we use? So technically the tools, just basic, just email, Google Drive, OneDrive, or any other secured storage. Again, secured ones. Please be careful on saving those documents. Make sure it's the secured one. That's why here with MX Realty agents, we require all of your emails to have two-factor authentication so that nobody can have access to those precious documents. We don't want to be the person liable for fraud or identity theft for your clients. Comprehensive tracker, DocuSign, and back agent with checklist. Back agent is what we use, the lone wolf one, because it's pretty much comprehensive. It lists out all the documents that we need, and everything is actually in there. And as for the comprehensive tracker, Let me just go ahead and show that this with you. So this is what I use for you guys. So it's kind of like, it's not comprehensive if you look at it right now, because I have, of course, to cover the actual addresses, actual MLS numbers, and actual contact information of everybody. But this is how I actually track your transactions. I also have your contingencies right here, so that I would know what's done, not done. What's, of course, what's red is red. That means it's either not yet done or already past the deadline. So everything else is here. So this is what I use to actually advise you if ever there are things or there are deadlines that you have to comply, so that before it expires, we can make sure that's already done. And as for compliance, these are the documents that I do submit. And even your commissions, I do track them. So that way, if you have a question suddenly, like, hey, I think I did not get the right amount, so I can go ahead and explain that to you further. And of course, contact information. We want to ensure that all the contact information that we have for your clients are here, so that when I send out an email, I know that I'm sending it to the right party. And as for the templates, as I've mentioned earlier, let's say you just have to put the amount in here. I just put the effective date, and I'll just put the contingency dates that you have written on your access contract and riders. It would automatically adjust the dates for us. And this is what I will use to send out as an email. And common pitfalls and how to avoid them. So it's pretty much covered on the previous slide. So missing deadlines, again, sorry, again, for buyers, we don't want deadlines being missed, incomplete or incorrect documentation. So all of the initials and whatnot, ineffective communication. So everything pretty much the one that we've tackled about, right? But this is the big one. As again, as I've mentioned, for buyers, we don't want them to be on default, because that would risk our clients to lose their deposit. So anything that you do, again, for buyers, deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. These are the keywords. For sellers, it's more of like contract details. Let's say there's an upcoming assessment, right? And it was discussed that the buyer will pay for the assessment. But on your access contract, you check that seller will pay, or you forgot to check anything. That's why it automatically defaulted to seller paying all the assessments prior to closing. So be careful on those. Those are the things that I also oversee, so that I could make sure that, hey, this is what it says. There's an assessment right here. Are you sure it's your client who's paying for it, or is it the other party? For those things. Because again, lack of attention in detail to disclosure would actually lead to a costly mistake in the long run. So let's look at statistics. So research says, technically it's just a bunch of numbers, but pretty much as what it can says here, that again, going back to your 20 and 80%, you don't want to waste time on documents, transactions, and what have you. Again, what's the cost of your TC compared to the time you should be spending going on appointments, listing contracts, and making phone calls for your lead generation? So it increases the closing rate, because sometimes missing those deadlines and then falling apart on everything else, it may end up like canceling the contract. So we don't want that. So when you have a TC, there's another set of eyes that could help you, and then that would actually increase your closing rate. Client satisfaction as well, because they would feel that it's organized. People are trying, like, there's more than one person that helps them on their journey, because a buying process or a selling process is a journey for them. It's part of their, I don't know, like, successful story. So we want to go ahead and give them the notion that they are important. They are VIPs. And as for sales volume, yep, it actually increases sales volume, because again, you have more time to actually go out there, make phone calls, do your 20%. That's why it will increase your sales volume and reduce errors and compliance issues. The things that you actually always missed before, there's another set of eyes that could actually help you. And then one final thought of the day, again, penny wise, pound foolish, as what Joe mentioned. So using your TC for 80% work and focusing your energy on a 20% that drives your success. So again, don't really save. I know, like, you might say that this is a $500,000 transaction, and they don't want to pay the transaction fee. Let's say you also have to pay a lot of things. You run around, spend too much time, gas and whatnot for that transaction to be listed, and now it's under contract. They don't want to pay the transaction fee. And you might think, I'm not going to pay it on my own. I'll just do my transaction because, again, I'll save money. But no, that's not the case. Because, again, the time that you will be spending sending those emails, collating those documents, and then there's an initial that has to be sent out for everybody, and you have to chase all of them. You have to change your HOA documents. That's too much. You should spend those time alone for lead generation and lead follow-up. That's what it says. Don't let penny-wise decisions cost you pounds in lost opportunities. And I guess I'll just get it back to Joe if he has additional questions, concerns, or anything that he wants to add.
Awesome. Thank you, Irene. So as you can see, Irene takes this job of transaction coordinating very serious. I think a lot of people, they see what happens on the front end of a transaction. You're seeing the emails, you're seeing the follow-up, but you don't see what a lot of people don't see is all of the work that goes into this on the back end, right? The front of the house looks very clean, looks very organized. And the reason that is because Irene is so clean and organized on the back end of these transactions as well. So, I think a lot of people, it really does feed into this penny wise and pound foolish, where they don't see the value of a transaction coordinator and what they bring to the table. But having this additional level of oversight, this additional layer of professionalism on top of it, and just having that person that makes sure that things don't slip through the cracks, especially communication, is vital to not only this one transaction here, where, yeah, obviously it's very important, but to all of our future business that we can possibly get from our customers. So, I really can't say enough how much we appreciate Irene and everything that she does. And the one thing, for the agents that are with our office, that are Miranda Executive Agents, because Irene is working under my direction, the broker of the office, she does have a little bit more discretion that she can take, because she can pull me into these transactions at any time. Just like you can, as the agent, you can pull yourself into the transaction at any time. But Irene really, what a lot of people don't know is Irene communicates with me about these transactions. And, even at the slightest hint of a problem, if Irene is involved in this transaction, she will reach out to me and get my input and my advice. And, and then she can go back to the agent and communicate that to the agent. A lot of times, even before the agent realizes that there is a problem, right? She'll catch it because she's been involved in so many transactions, so many closings, so many problems, and which in turn, have led to a knowledge of how to solve these problems, right? Solutions to problems, and just getting in front of things before it becomes a problem, right? So she's not a personal admin. She won't take care of administrative work necessarily, but having somebody here to make this process more smooth, make this process easier, to me, it's priceless. Priceless, because while she's watching the timelines, while she's monitoring the paperwork, while she's checking for initials and signatures and that the contract is complete and accurate, you can be out looking for your next deal, right? You can be out, prospecting for your next listing. You can be out networking for your next buyer, right? That's what the agent is supposed to be doing. The agent's not supposed to be shuffling paperwork, chasing down, an addendum from another agent. An agent's not supposed to be, monitoring transactions to make sure that every date is necessarily in line. They should, right? I mean, you should oversee everything, but really this is something that can be leveraged, that can be given to somebody else. And the amazing thing about our brokerage is the cost of a TC when you're an in-house Miranda executive agent is really a pittance compared to what you would pay for a transaction coordinator anywhere outside of this brokerage. So, you know, if you haven't met Irene, if you don't know her, you know, get to know her. You know, if you haven't had her process a transaction yet, hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into what she does, and, you know, how this, you know, it's really taken very serious. Everything that we do, we have systems, processes, checklists, you know, oversight, and, you know, a lot of redundancies in our systems to make sure that nothing is missed and nothing slips through the cracks. And this is just, you know, one other small part of what we do, and I think what sets us and our agents apart from other real estate agents. So thank you again, Irene. Real quick, I think we're going to do one more shameless plug. If you liked what you heard, if you want to work with Irene and have her be your transaction coordinator, you know, scan that QR code, and, you know, let's talk about how we can make that happen. And since that's done and everybody has scanned the QR code,